This is the Flory ST14 shuttle truck, and what we're going to go over in this video is how to properly set up and adjust this machine, how to operate it, and how to maintain it throughout the season. So let's get into it. This machine is equipped with airbag suspension that are controlled from the cab. So the height of those airbags, we control that from the display screen. The factory setting on those airbags is 6.5 inches. Typically, you're going to be between 5.5 to 8 inches. Those airbags will automatically inflate or deflate depending on how heavy the load is. So if you set that at 6 inches, it's going to maintain 6 inches on those airbags regardless of how heavy or light the load is. We have a position sensor right through here. It's yellow, and I point it out because if that sensor is not working properly, it's going to throw off the airbags. And basically that sensor is pointing down to a plate. And if that sensor lens gets gunked up with mud or anything that's going to obstruct its vision of that plate, or that plate itself gets caked with mud, then it's going to throw things off. So if you're going to, and we'll look at that display screen later, it's going to give you two numbers. It's going to give you what you set it to be and what the actual setting is. And if those two numbers don't match, then chances are we might have something wrong down here with that sensor. So we'll take a look at that, show you where it's at, and that way you know where to look for and what to do if you run into any issues. The other adjustment to make is the floor chain that we have that unloads the shuttle truck. So we've got the tension bolts right down here that we're going to adjust that chain as it stretches out over time, and it will. Just going to keep the tension on it so it stays tight. And then back here on the rear, we've got two pillow block bearings that pivot this unloading gate. And really there's not a whole lot of adjustment to be done here, but if it ever happens to where this gate does not close all the way and this seal is not up against the back end of our roller, then all we need to do is loosen the 4 bolts on these bearings, get this gate back to vertical to where we got a good seal here, tighten those bolts back up, and everything should be good to go. So let's go over the controls of the ST14 cab and show you what each function does. So up here we've got our shifter, our F&R shifter. When it's in neutral, it's automatically in park. Anytime we move this into forward or reverse, we want to make sure we're pushing down on the brake pedal. Also on this shifter, we've got a Roman numeral 1 and 2. That's going to be your high and your low gear. So 1 is going to be low and 2 is going to be high. Also on the very end here, we've got a push button. That's going to be your high and low beams. So if you're running down the road, you can switch that back and forth. On the upper control console, we've got our auger speed and our chain speed that we can control. So as we're unloading the carts and loading up the auger, pay attention to the way that is loading, and you can adjust your auger speed as necessary to make sure we load that bin up evenly. And our chain speed can also be adjusted, so our unload chain. Typically we're going to start that at 0, and then when we open up that gate and that initial dump goes into the elevator, we'll slowly start to creep up this chain speed. And basically what we're trying to do is keep an eye on the elevator belt, make sure we got a nice steady flow of nuts going up the belt, not to overload it, but anytime it starts to get thin, we can go ahead and start to increase that chain speed. By the time you're done unloading the shuttle truck, you should be all the way to 10. We also have our caution light up here. Down here on the lower control console, we've got a bank of rocker switches. The first one here are our lights. We've got road lights and we've got field lights, and it's important to know the difference between the two. If we have field lights on, we've got LEDs on in the front and the rear, which can be dangerous for going down the road. So make sure anytime we're going down the road, we've got our road lights on. The next set of switch right here is going to be the tank lights. So if we need to shine lights inside the tank, we can turn that on or off. The unload chain on or off right here, and then we've got our AC controls right here. Now this 8-button panel, we've got cruise control, so it operates just like your vehicle. You turn the cruise control on or off, and then you can do the deceleration or acceleration right here with these 2 buttons. We've got our auger direction, forward and reverse, and we've got our unload gate, open or close. And then down here we've got the purge for our reversing fan. Now that reversing fan is on a timer. Suggests that you let that timer do its work. But once in a while, if you're in a spot where you got really bad leaves, you can go ahead and use that manual purge button. Okay, on the display screen, we're pretty much going to have every gauge that we need right here. There's not going to be any screens to toggle between. So up here we've got our fuel level, and we've got our def level, and then over here we've got our air restriction indicator and our engine temp. Down here we've got the engine RPMs and the ground speed, battery voltage, oil pressure, and any of our warning icons will show up here. Also down here, you'll notice we got auger speed at 60%, and then we've got our unload chain speed that we can also, that'll display right here. Now to get to other screens here, you push any button along this row and those will pop up. So the first one here, the gear with the wrench, you hit that once, and then now you've got several different options. Okay, so right here we can come in and we can change our language from that screen. We can change our settings, our clock, and then here's our air ride suspension. That's something that I want to talk about here. So here in our air ride suspension, we've got it in auto mode. We can change that from manual to auto, and you notice that this number went away when it was manual mode. So what auto mode is doing is it's showing us the setting that we're setting it at, which is over here, and what the actual setting is right now. So anytime those numbers don't match up, that's when we need to troubleshoot. Now they should be pretty close, within 1/2 of an inch. To get out of that screen, just hit that back arrow, and then we'll get into this next screen here, which is going to be pretty much all of the readouts on the machine. So it's not important to know what each one of these numbers are for. It's good for you to be able to get into this if you're helping troubleshoot this machine, maybe over the phone with a technician. So just knowing how to get into this screen is going to be the important part. Now you can troubleshoot from here. All of these different readouts will tell you what's going on with the machine. So if you are familiar enough with them, you can do your own troubleshooting. Going back, hit one of these buttons again, and this is where your fault codes, you'll go to find your fault codes. So if we get any kind of warning icon, we're going to come to this screen, hit that engine icon, and then that's where our faults will show up. And all those fault codes will be in the back of the operator's manual. If we have a fault code that ever shows up and we think maybe it wasn't a legit fault code, you can go ahead and hit the button with the trash can on it. If it goes away, then you're right. If it doesn't go away, then it is actually a fault code that we need to pay attention to. And then this last screen with the wrench and the clock will come in here, and that's where all of our hour meters are at. So we can go ahead and reset any of these except the engine hours. The ST14 comes with foot pedals that operate just like your vehicle. One thing to keep in mind is when we go into forward, it's always going to be the direction we're facing. So if I'm facing this direction, forward's going to be that way. If I spin my seat around, forward is now going to be in that direction. So don't overthink it. Something else I want to point out is we've got 2 of these proximity sensors down here, one on each side of the seat, and that's letting the computer know which direction the seat is facing. So if you aren't completely locked in like this, that machine's not going to go anywhere. So make sure we're latched into place, and then we can go forward or reverse. If you are latched into place and you're still not going forward, well, that's a good place to start looking at those sensors there. Unloading on the go with the ST14 can take some practice, but with a few tips, I think it'll make life a lot easier. So what I have heard from operators and what I found in the field is actually keeping the machine in high gear while you're running down the road to chase down the harvester, and keep it in high gear actually when you're trying to engage that cart. In high gear, it's less touchy with the foot pedal, so trying to make your adjustments to match that speed with the harvester is a lot easier in high gear. So keep it in high gear, and about when the back end of this bumper gets underneath the dog leg of the elevator chain of that cart is when you're going to want to engage cruise control. And you're going to be about this far away from that bumper when you do that. Engage cruise control, and then you can use your acceleration and deceleration buttons to slowly and easily bump up against that cart and unload. When that cart initially starts unloading, go ahead and leave the augers off. Let the back end of this bin start to fill up, and as it starts to get filled up, then you can turn your augers on and slowly start to feed the material towards the front of the vehicle. We don't want those augers running too fast or too early in the process. What will happen is we might front load this, the bin before we're completely full. So if we want to get most out of every load that we do, we want to try and load this bin as evenly as we can front to back when we're doing that. And then once we get that full, spin the seat around and you go drive right back out where you came from. When we unload at the elevator, we are going to want to put this in low gear. We need that low gear for the extra torque. So as we slowly creep up to the elevator, you're going to line yourself up and get as centered as possible. This bumper will bump up against the elevator, but nothing will turn on until this gate is open. When this gate is opened up, it will hit the trigger on the elevator, which will start the belt on the elevator. So we want to go ahead and let that process all take place, let that initial dump of nuts end up on the elevator before we turn the unload chain on. So once we get that initial dump on there, then we can turn our unload chain on with the speed dial all the way to 0, and keep an eye as we're loading that elevator. Keep a nice full carpet of nuts on there without overloading the front of it, and slowly turn that speed dial up as we need more and more product on the belt. Now, if there's ever a situation where the truck is full of nuts and you are not done unloading here, all you need to do is lower that gate just a bit, and that will shut everything off. It'll shut the belt off, it'll shut the unload gate off, and so everything will stop right there. You can move your truck and then you can re-engage and start the process over again. Now, the other reason why we want to be in low gear when we're at the elevator is these shuttle trucks and your Flory elevator are designed to be pushed along a road without assistance from anybody else operating the machine. So as we're trying to load these trucks from back to front, we can go ahead and push, and basically on skids, push that elevator down the road as we load those trailers up. So we need to be in low gear for that extra torque. Okay, so let's go over the maintenance of this machine. So as far as grease points go, we've got some daily grease points that we need to hit back here. We've got a vertical pin with 1 grease point, hit that daily. Underneath this joint right here, we've got an oscillation joint that's going to have 2 grease points. Need to get that daily. You're going to have to get up underneath there to get to them. And then we've got right here on our rod ends of our cylinders, 1 on each side, we're going to have grease points. So there's 2 more right there. And then we're going to have 2 grease points here in the front of the machine. The 2 grease points we got up here in front are on the swing arms, and you're going to have to get down here to really take a look and find out where they're at. The unload chain has 4 pillow block bearings at each corner of the bin, and we're going to need to hit those with grease every 50 hours. And then the augers have 4 bearings, front and rear. The rear bearings are here on the inside wall of this tank. And we've got 2 pillow blocks on the front there. Those 4 bearings will also need to be hit every 50 hours with grease. And lastly, we've got 2 bearings here for the unload gate, and those just need grease once a season. Okay, on the engine side of things, with the fuel system, we've got a primary fuel filter and a water bowl, and we've got the secondary fuel filter right here, and we've got an inline fuel filter. With a brand new machine, after the first 50 hours, let's replace all 3 of those filters, and then after that, it's going to be every 500 hours. The crankcase breather filter is right next to them, right here. We're going to replace that every 1,000 hours and make sure we're in a very clean environment when we open up this cap. The DEF system on this machine is all going to be right here. So we've got our DEF tank right here, and we want to make sure that this entire area is very clean before we open up this cap. And we want to make sure there's no machines around stirring up dust. So we need to be in a clean environment when we open up this cap. Can't let any dirt inside the DEF tank. Our DEF pump is sitting right here. And I like to point that out because inside that DEF pump is the DEF filter. So every 500 hours or once a season, you're going to be replacing that DEF filter in here. The cooling package sits up here in the front of the machine. We've got our reservoir tank and our fill back here in this black box. We've got our reversing fan to keep this grill clean of any kind of dirt buildup or leaf buildup. Open up this door to get access to the radiator, the oil cooler, fuel cooler, AC condenser, charge air, all that's right in here. Want to make sure on a daily basis we're getting in here, blowing those fins out, make sure we're not damaging them, but we got to blow those out. The Clean Fix fan will take care of cleaning things off of this front grill, but it's not going to take care of cleaning these fins out. So make sure we get in there, blow those out on a daily basis. These engines do not come with break-in oil, so your interval will start at 250 hours. Every 250 hours we're replacing the engine oil and the oil filter as well. Inside this compartment is where the air filter resides, along with the pre-cleaner box. So we've got a Donaldson air filter right here. We got to make sure we're using Donaldson air filters to replace it with. You will get very good life out of these air filters, so there's no reason to be in here more than necessary. What we want to do is use the restriction indicator on the display screen inside the cab to let us know when it's time to replace these filters. At 75%, you're going to see an icon on that screen just start to flash at you. That's just giving you a warning that you're getting close to this thing being full, the end of its life. At 100%, you'll get a warning that that icon will flash a little bit more rapidly, and you actually get a beep that will kind of let you know that it's full. So these are Donaldson air filters. If you're going to replace them, they need to be with Donaldson brand air filters. And I suggest you use the blue. They're going to hold more dirt than the white air filters. But with this shuttle truck, you should get really good life. So there's no reason to be in here on a daily basis. We also have this pre-cleaner box right here that's doing a lot of the work for us. Inside, past this screen here, are a bunch of spinner tubes that are pulling in the air. It's separating the dirt from the air. The dirt fills up in this box, and through our exhaust system here, we're pulling a vacuum, keeping that box clean of the dirt as it expels it out the exhaust, and we have relatively clean air going into these air filters, so it remains pretty clean. Make sure when we're getting those filters back on there that we seat them really well and get them back in their original spot. And make sure all three clips are engaged. On that filter. Okay, also in here, we've got 3 high amp fuses, and we've got our master disconnect switch. I like to point out these fuses because if you ever run into any troubleshooting issues with electrical power, don't forget to check these fuses here. That might be the problem. This master disconnect switch, we have this wait to disconnect light right here, and we want to make sure that light is off anytime that we turn this off. When you shut that engine off, you're going to hear from the DEF pump, you're going to hear kind of a high-pitched whine, and that pump is pulling all the DEF that was in the lines back to the tank. We don't want any DEF left in the lines where it can crystallize. So let the pump do its work. Don't turn this off until you see that light off. Typically, you're not going to be flipping this on and off during the from one day to the next unless you're doing it for safety purposes. You can turn this off and padlock it. Otherwise, it's just really meant for winter storage. Back here, on this back side of this tire is the battery underneath the cab right here. So just so you know the location of that. And our cab air filter is right inside this door. On the shuttle truck, our gear drives or drive hubs are here on the front tires instead of the rear on our other machines. So these hubs, after the first 50 hours, you're going to be replacing the gear oil inside of them, and then once a season, replace the oil. And we want that oil halfway full. So this drain plug right here, we're going to want it at the 9 o'clock or the 3 o'clock position when we fill it. That way we know that we're half full. All these lug nuts here, after the first day, first 10 hours, go ahead and tighten them. After the first week, tighten them, and then once a season, make sure we get in there and tighten those up. 50 PSI on the front and rear tires. The hydraulic oil tank is located right here on the ST14 with our sight gauge right here. We want to make sure we keep these tanks at about 3/4 of the way full. That way we have an air gap at the top to allow these tanks to breathe. The charge filter and the return filter for the hydraulic system are located right underneath the cab right here. These two orange filters, you're going to replace them after the first 50 hours on a new machine, then every 500 hours after that. One other item that's going to require some regular maintenance is the AC unit that's sitting inside the cab right on this side of the wall. We've got some drain plugs right underneath this part of the cab here. Just make sure those are free and clear of any kind of debris. If those get plugged up, then your AC system is going to fill up with water and spill into the cab. So keep those free and clear, keep an eye on those, and your AC system should work really well. Also, we've got a filter on that air conditioning unit, and you can access that from inside the cab. Replace that filter. Really, you can just clean it out yourself. You're not going to harm anything. So blow it out, wash it out, do what you need to do. Make sure it's dry when you get it back in there. Keep that free and clear, and your AC should work just fine. Thanks for watching this video on the ST14. Hopefully you found it helpful. I do want to mention that everything that we went over in this video, all of how to set this thing up, how to operate it, how to maintain it, you can find all that in the operator's manual. All the maintenance schedules, all the filters to be used, the fluids to be used, how much to use. You're going to find all that here in the operator's manual, as well as fault codes and things like that. So get familiar with this, keep this around, it's a really handy tool.